And he showed me my personality type, and everything in there about the perfectionist was me. And what I learned, and I never knew this for 40 years, Heather, was that perfectionists grow up in an environment where they get punished for making mistakes.
Welcome back, guys. We're in episode 130, and I do have another guest for you. Back to the Philippines theme, back when I was on stage in Cebu, and there were some amazing other speakers there. This was one of the other speakers that I knew you guys had to be introduced to. Now, interestingly enough, back on episode 124, his wife was on it, Daniel Tolson. So you're going to kind of hear a couple of different cool angles around different technology to bring out the best of who you are and really understand who you are, your superpowers, right? So I want to talk you through who Daniel Tolson is. He has quite the journey. You'll be amazed with where he's come from and sort of the struggles he's gotten through in his life as well. So Daniel is a former Australian champion athlete and regarded as Asia's #1 business coach with more than 10,000 case studies on business leaders. He has co-led a team of over 17,000 cabin crew at Emirates Airlines, and he has he's had more than 25,000 leaders apply his ideas to make an impact. He has a really cool leadership model with 3 eyes that he's going to talk to you guys about. We are also actually going to dive into my actual report. Remember with Nini, we talked about, I did a 90-second sort of voice recording, and there's a report that came out of that. He's actually going to talk through my results with you guys. Oh my gosh, I don't know if I should be sharing that. No, I can't wait for you to hear them. So we go off in a lot of different angles on this conversation. And if you're feeling lost, if you're struggling on who you are, and really what your strengths are, you're going to want to tune in. And he also has a really great couple of tips for you to feel better and really, really perform at your absolute max of who you are day to day. So you guys, are you ready? We're going to bring Daniel onto the show. Let's do it. Daniel, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy you are with me.
I'm strapped in, ready to go.
You so are. We're going to have such a good chat. We can go in so many different directions with this, so it'll be really good. Now, I do like to start with tangible takeaways because, we're all busy. We have a lot going on. So let's start with that. What are a few tips that you have for the listeners to go or get through high growth moments in their business with less overwhelm and less stress?
Well, I was at the local hospital the other day, and the doctors said the top 3 things that people are coming to see them for at the moment is sleep, stress, and anxiety. And What I believe is if you want to overcome overwhelm, you've got to be well rested. So it really starts with sleep. And to have good sleep, you've got to have a clean spleen. So if you're interested in getting better sleep, more productivity, avoid overwhelm, this is going to be a great episode for your audience.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's really interesting. I actually, that's sad. Actually, that sort of makes me sad that that's what you were hearing when you went to hospital, that it literally is sort of like an epidemic. We're just so bombarded with so much information, and then we let our brains run away with that. So okay.
It is. The numbers there back it up. In Australia at the moment, Medibank Private recently released a report saying that stress is costing the Australian economy $14 billion.
Oh my God.
Now, business owners also have to take that very personally because it's costing businesses more than $10 billion in sick days. And I've felt it firsthand. I used to co-lead a team of 17,500 cabin crew at Emirates Airline. And if my crew were sick, if my crew were fatigued, they couldn't make the flight. Now, if they couldn't make the flight and we couldn't replace the crew member, the airline was fined $2,000 per minute.
Oh my
Now,
goodness.
that's a big airline. People might say, well, that's okay for them. Well, what about if you're a small business operator and your #1 closer is sick today? They're sick tomorrow. They're sick for the rest of the week. What happens to the sales? Well, they disappear and they never come back. So what I believe is that we have to be well rested, whether we're the business owner And if we're the business owner, we've got to look at the rotation of our team members. We've got to make sure that they're well rested for Monday morning. And there's a secret there that if they're well rested, they're actually 400% more productive. So you think about it, they could do 4 days worth of results in one day if they're just well rested. And I know you talk about this hustler's mindset. It's an illusion. And sleep's the answer.
Look, I'm so glad you said that. There's very few people that say that point. And one guy interviewed Peter Lakovic a while back. He's like, it's only if you believe in it.
It's the badge of honor. Yeah. And I've heard you say before that people talk about, hustling, and it's a badge of honor. They say, look at how hard I'm working. Look at the extent to which I'm going. It's costing my health and my relationships. And they expect a round of applause. Yeah. And they start to build monuments to their pain. Think about every war that every country's ever been to in the past century. They always build a monument to the pain. And then we bow down to the pain. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be stressed. And people aren't impressed by it anymore. Nobody says, wow, you're so stressed. Congratulations. They're like, take a rest, have some time out.
Yeah, what's wrong with you? No, I love this perspective, Daniel. It's really, really important. And I'd like to ask you on the point of rest, do you have any advice for people on how they can get better or more rest?
It all starts with sleep. If you want to have a lot of energy, if you want to be charismatic, if you want to attract the best opportunity and the best people, you've got to be well rested. And it all starts with sleep. So the numbers that I've been looking at recently is 50% of the adult population are sleep deprived. It means they're getting less than 5 hours of sleep per night. Our body actually doesn't start to heal and regenerate until we've had at least 7 hours of restorative sleep. What it also makes it worse is if you're a drinker or you're a smoker, then your liver gets really agitated, and your liver is processing the toxins in the body between about 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning. And I know it's happened to me. I've had a scotch, I've had a beer, and at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and I go, oh my gosh, the alcohol's worn off. Yeah. But what's really happening internally from a Chinese medicine perspective is the liver's getting agitated. It's having to overwork. It can't get rid of the alcohol, so it wakes you up. Now, if you're just having one drink per night, or if you're having a couple of cigarettes before you go to sleep at night, there's a 70% higher chance that you'll experience sleep deprivation. So we have to learn to have really good sleep hygiene. Just like you wash between all the cracks in your body, you got to start to have really good sleep hygiene. We have to be in bed at 9 o'clock at night, because after 9 o'clock, all the body organs start to function at their peak. And if you're awake, just between, say, 11 p.m. and 1 p.m., your gallbladder, 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., your gallbladder is not going to function. And if your gallbladder is not functioning, you're going to wake up in the morning with aches and pains. Right. But if you just have a couple of good nights rest and you get to bed early, you'll wake up and you'll feel fresh. You don't need as much coffee. I still need coffee. You don't need as much. You don't need all the chocolate or the carbs, but you've got that natural energy. So it really comes back to sleep.
Do you know, I'm one of those nerds that wears a Fitbit every night, and I look at my app in the morning and I look at how long did I sleep, what was my sleep score, what REM sleep, and all of it. Because I completely get that if I don't have a certain amount of sleep and also a deep sleep, then I just am not the same. My brain is not functioning at full capacity. I had no idea you were going to come into this conversation with this angle, so thank you.
Well, talking about your brain, and we might get into it later on. Sure. Before we went to the Business Blueprint conference in Cebu, you completed one of our mind reports.
I did.
And in that mind report, it showed me your type of stress. And your type of stress is logical stress. So you're somebody who's very analytical. You're always thinking about the future and where you want to go. And for you actually need more rest than other people, because people won't exhaust you. You won't lose sleep over people. You'll lose sleep over projects and things, finance, career, and the future. But because you use
Spot
so
on.
much processing power, you need more sleep. So you got to start to pay attention to that Fitbit.
Do you know, I sleep like 8.5 hours a night. So hopefully that's good.
What's your sleep score? How many
uh,
times do you get into
yeah.
the restorative sleep?
Yeah, that would be deep, right? Deep sleep, because we have the
The deep
three
sleep.
types, right? So the light, the deep, and the REM. I average anywhere from an hour and a half, like roughly an hour and a half, sometimes even up to 2 hours of deep sleep a night.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, that's the goal. And a lot
Yeah,
of people, when they have a look at their sleep scores, whether it be on the Fitbit or on the Whoop, they're
yeah,
around about 20 to 30% in restorative sleep.
yeah.
So what happens is that the organs never function properly, and the hormones in the body aren't released often enough, and they're not cleared out regularly enough.
Right.
So it's really important sleep. I used to wear that badge of honor, and I would message my mate. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm in bed. I'm like, it's 4 a.m. I'm still grinding. I'm still hustling. Now, the problem was I had these big black eyes and I looked like a panda, and
Yeah,
I'm sore every day. And the excuse that I make up is I live in the tropics. I live in Taiwan. It's the pressure up here. It's the heat. It's the humidity.
yeah.
But to support that, I just had to keep telling bullshit stories. But once I learned to have good sleep hygiene, to get into bed early, to get the right sleep, I started to look younger, feel younger, and definitely have a better work-life balance.
Really cool. Wow. Okay. So speaking of work-life balance, we need to know more about you, Daniel. So you just mentioned that you were in charge of how many thousands of cabin crew? What was the number?
17,500.
Okay, that's crazy. So
Just a couple.
let's turn let's turn back time a little bit. I want to understand, obviously that's what you used to do, but what's been your journey from there into what you do now, and what are you doing these days?
My journey when I was with Emirates Airline was really tough. I joined there in 2008. Now, the reason why I joined in 2008 was because I shut down my business in 2007. And
Okay.
between 2007 and 2008, I had one of those life-changing experiences. I was living in Sydney. I was standing on a construction site, and
Huh.
my job was controlling traffic. I had a stop slow sign in my hand, and I'd direct
Right.
traffic. And people would abuse me. They'd throw food at me. And one day I kind of looked up to the sky and having a come to Jesus or a come to God moment. I said, is this my life? Is this what I'm going to be doing for the
Yeah.
rest of my life? With all of this knowledge and skill and this talent and this life experience, is this what I'm going to end up with? And I looked around and there was other people on the job site who were looking old. They were battered because they were out in the heat and the cold elements. And I knew that if I didn't make a change, I would have been in that position forever. I would have been a labourer for the rest of my life. So I got the courage to get out of my comfort zone. I applied for a job with Emirates Airline and I got it immediately. I was on my best behaviour. And when I got to Emirates, my life problems all came back up to the surface.
Okay.
So when I was 11, I was diagnosed with linear sequential learning disability. My left and right brain wouldn't communicate. I was
Oh,
visually impaired. I was tone deaf. My bronchial tubes were collapsing. I was allergic
oh
to
my.
almost every single thing that you could have. And all of those problems came back in 2008, especially the learning disabilities. And those learning disabilities, they really stopped me from growing as a person. I couldn't get good education because I just couldn't understand things in my 20s, even at 28. And so I started with Emirates Airline. And the first year that I had exams, I failed my exams.
Okay.
I would have to resit and I'd fail them again. I'd get warning letters. I'd be called back into the office. And my managers were saying, Daniel, what's wrong with you?
Mm.
And now I've got to make all these excuses up. Well, when I was 11, I had linear sequential learning disability. Every time I had an exam, I had to have an interpreter to write down my answers or read the questions to me. And I
Wow.
said, unfortunately, all of this stuff has come back. And they said, well, you got to get your stuff together because every time you fail the exam, which is only 80%, the pass mark goes up to 95%. It only gets harder. And I had this pattern. Every exam, every 6 to 12 months for my license, I'd be back in there explaining myself. And so all those problems came back. So I thought, I've got to start to deal with this. I've really got to learn how to conquer this if I want to get past that. And so I started to work on myself, and then my wife had an accident on an aircraft, and that left her with a permanent disability. And for 2.5 years, we had one income. And then just as she was getting healthy, she had come close to miscarriage 3 times and lost her job. And then I had to make another decision. Well, I've used all of my holidays. I've got nothing left. I've asked the company for time off so I can see the birth of my daughter. And they said, Daniel, we've supported you as much as we can for 2.5 years. You're on your own. You got to take the risk. You might get days off, you might not, but you got to decide. So I just got promoted to co-leading a team of 17,500 people. Just promoted. Done all of my exams, passed everything finally.
Got there, yeah.
And then a month later, I'm resigning from that position.
Wow.
And so I leave Dubai. I move to Taiwan just because I want to see my daughter. I don't want to miss out on that. The most important thing. And then a year later, I'm almost bankrupt. I've lost all of my money starting my business. And what I learned was that there's a lot to learn about business. There's a lot to learn before you conquer the world. You got to conquer yourself. So that's where the journey started. And once I started to get results for myself and understand how the mind really works, that's when I started to help others. So that's the journey. And it's been very easy.
Yeah, just a little easy. Wow. I'm blown away by your background and how many obstacles that you have managed to get through, repeatedly resurfacing the past as well. That's intense. Okay, so you work with the mind and you help people with this. Tell us more. So what are you doing right now with your life and business?
Well, for me, people come to me because they want to become a better leader. And they always ask for the same 3 things. They say, Daniel, I want impact, I want influence, and I want income. And they keep asking me for the same 3 things. I said, well, what do you want to do? They said, well, I want to catapult my influence. And they get to a stage where they've developed these skills. Some of these people have the cure for cancer, but they just don't have enough influence. And they say, Daniel, I've got the cure for cancer, but I just can't influence and persuade people. I don't know how to communicate my ideas. So we help them with that. They want to accelerate their impact. And they say, hey, I've got the cure for cancer. It's nice to help one person, but what if I could help 100? What if I could help 1,000 people? And really, they just want to get those results faster. And then thirdly, like everybody, they want to make a lot more money. But the key difference here, it's not the accumulation of money for power. It's the accumulation of money to help others. And one of my clients, I said to him, $5 billion in revenues, isn't that enough? He said, Daniel, it's not enough. I said, tell me why it's not enough. He said, we're going to make $6 or $7 billion a year in this business. And I said, why? What's the motivation? He said, well, at $5 billion per year, I've only been able to feed 2 million homeless children.
Oh.
And he said, that's not enough. He said, there's more starving children and we've got to grow these businesses so we can earn more and help more.
Yeah.
And that's the 3 things my clients want. They want influence, impact, and income. And it's my job to help them become a better leader so they can have everything they want.
I love that it's so simple, but a great model as well. The 3 I's, it's easy to remember. And I want to know more about how you do this then with your clients. Do you have a team? Do you work one-on-one? How do you help them?
My biggest breakthrough in this field was trusting in science.
Okay.
And I had started my journey in personal development in 2008 when I hired a life coach. And it was a great experience. And I said to the coach, I said, I want to do what you're doing. And so he made a referral and I met a company in America and I started to do a coaching program. And I got to the end of the program and they said, Daniel, you've got a coach from center. And I said, well, what's that? They said, from the center of who you are. And I said, well, I got no idea who I am. Can somebody help me with that? And they said, well, you got to find it out for yourself. So I went from training to training, from program to programming, book to book, looking for this answer. Who am I? And for me, it was really confusing. And I was still confused. I was working with people. I'm still trying to figure out who I am. And in 2016, I met a workplace psychologist. And the workplace psychologist said, Daniel, if you want to get to the next level in your career and as a leader, you've got to learn about who you are. And I said, well, how do I do that? She said, there's scientific reports today that can reveal to you more than you know about yourself. You could do an assessment, and a 30-page report could tell you more about yourself than 30 years of self-discovery. And I said, well, let me have it. So I completed one of her reports. She debriefed me. She took me through the report. And I said, how do you know this stuff about me? How is it that everything in this report is so accurate? It's like you've been a fly on the wall. It's like you've been listening in to the conversations with my wife. She said, well, Daniel, the research has been done. We've been studying human psychology for more than 2,000 years. And then I realized who I was and what was at the center of who I am. I started to learn about how do I approach problems? How do I approach people? What's the pace, the environment that I like? How do I deal with policy and compliance? I started to learn all of this, and that was a massive game changer, because once I got my hand on that technology, in the following year, I acquired 1,300 new customers in my business, and they were all looking for the same thing. They're all asking the same question, who am I?
Who am
And
I?
that's self-awareness. So for me and for all of my clients, we always start with self-awareness. Understanding who I am. Yeah. Why do I think and feel and act the way that I do? And once you understand that, that's the source of all of your confidence. You start to feel bulletproof. Where you would have procrastinated in the past, you want to take action because you're no longer afraid. But on the flip side of that, it's probably one of the scariest things that you can ever do. I met a gentleman years ago, and I did some coaching, and he invited me to his house. And I walked into his house and I said, there's something wrong here. And eventually I asked him, I said, why is every mirror in this house covered in newspaper?
Ooh.
And he said, I can't stand what I see in the mirror.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Now, a gentleman that I worked with, he was earning $600,000 a year, just a little bit over the average wage. And he said, Daniel, the scariest thing in your life is to figure out who you truly are. He said it's also the most liberating. And that came from somebody who was making $600,000 per year. And he would always encourage others, start with yourself. If you can understand who you are, then you can better understand others. And that's the core of empathy. If I have no idea why I think and feel the way that I do, how can I lead anybody else? So we always start with self-awareness. And for me today, I've delivered more than 10,000 scientific case studies in the field of emotional intelligence. And every single person has their mind blown. Firstly, they say, that's exactly who I thought I was. And then secondly, they say, I didn't know I had that superpower. They start to use it, and their success just starts to happen a lot faster. So that's where we start.
Okay, so can you walk me through a client of yours so I understand how you do this with somebody? Do you have somebody in mind, like a case study? You can say, this is this person, this is how we worked with them, this is how we uncovered who they really were. Fill me in.
I work with a young gentleman from South Australia.
Okay.
And he reached out to me when he was in his teenage years. And he said, Daniel, I don't like being an electrician. He says, I don't like climbing under the houses with the spider's webs. He says, I don't like crawling around in the roofs with the spider's web. He said, I don't like how my life is. He said, and I want to make a change. He said, once I finish my apprenticeship, then I'm going to start a business and I'm going to reach out to you. And true to his word, he reached out to me about 4 years later. And we started with a scientific report that revealed to him his personality type and his strengths. As soon as he understood his personality type, which was somebody who was very competitive and somebody who was very inattentive to details, he realized that the best position in a business for him was to go out and drum up the business and to hand all the details over to his team members. So he went out, he started to make sales, he started to bring customers into his business. And every time he brought a customer into his business, he found a new person to work for him who was highly attentive to detail. And he said, hey, here's a really detailed job. Take this. And we call that job matching. Yeah. Now, he went from starting with no startup capital through to a couple of years later where he's making more than $1 million per year. Mm-hmm. He leads a team of 7 people. And for every person that comes into his business, we start with an emotional quotient assessment. We have a look at their strengths, and then we say, we've got to get the right people on the bus, and then we've got to get them in the right position. And because we get them in the right position, he has a very low turnover. And all low turnover businesses are high profit businesses. And so we've been able to grow. Because he got his confidence up, I also saw him start to get out of his comfort zone. I'd seen him date many different girls. I met his fiancée, and then I was even invited to the wedding. And then when his baby was born, he gave me a $400 bottle of scotch. He said, hey, thank you for being on the journey with me. Yeah. And today, his business produces more than $1 million. He lives life on his terms. He's an impactful leader, and he's leaving his legacy with all of his clients and all the people that he hires. Oh. So that's where we start.
What a great story. What's this assessment that you keep talking about? Does it have a name?
We've got many different assessments. Okay. The favorite one I have is called a mind report. And what makes the mind report different is it uses vocal biomarker technology. What we do today is we do a 90-second voice recording. And inside of that 90-second voice recording, we can understand your personality and your inner potential. And once we start to understand how people are wired, we understand how they're affected by stress. We have a look at their personality type and the best position in a business. But we can also have a look at people's energy centers and their chakras. Yeah. So I don't know if you've counted this before, but the human head has 7 holes in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there's 7 chakras in the human body. And with this technology, we can have a look at the energy in all 7 levels. And if we have any imbalance in those chakras, it creates a lot of mental and emotional and even physiological disturbances. So that's the favorite one today. And the reason why it's my favorite is there's no bias. There's no yes or no questions. There's no 100-page assessment. It's based on your voice. So we're measuring brainwave frequencies. And this technology has its heritage in epigenetics, psychology, biology, and we get results in 90 seconds. That's my favorite one. That's called Mind Report.
And that's what I did, you guys. And that's what Daniel was saying earlier. He was talking about my sleep with me and that I'm very logical and I cannot turn off my brain. And that's probably why I'm in marketing, right? Because I have to read numbers and do all that stuff. But no, it is a phenomenal report. And I don't know if you guys have listened to a previous episode with Nini, which is actually Daniel's wife. She's talked a little bit about this too from a different angle. And if you by now are not convinced that you don't need one of these, I don't know what's going to convince you, because it is really powerful. And like Daniel was saying, because it's your voice, you have nowhere to hide. This is you. Like, you're not reading a disc profile and going, what's the best answer?
How do I want to present myself?
Exactly.
One of the things with this technology that surprises a lot of people is the accuracy, because I have delivered thousands of disc reports, and I love disc. I think it's a great science. But the one thing that people would always say to me, well, Daniel, I answered this as if I was at home, or I answered this question as if I was in the workplace.
Right.
And then when they read through the reports, they say, well, that's how I used to be. And that's because there's a bias in there. And when you look at a disc report, you can say, well, I can choose any of these 4 options. How do I want the other person to perceive me? And that's a limitation. Where with the voice, it's not about what you say. It's not about the words that you use. We're just measuring the vocal vibrations in your voice, and they come straight from the brain, straight out of your mouth. You can't see them, but yes, you can hear my voice and you can hear those vibrations. But the AI technology and the big data captures it and helps us understand it.
Yeah.
And I know for a lot of people, they feel overwhelmed, and this is a big part of your podcast. When I first was exposed to this technology in 2020, I was overworked, and that was the start of the pandemic. I was staying up to 2 and 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning trying to turn around my business, and I wore that as a badge of honor. And then when I got exposed to this technology, my consultant said to me, Daniel, have you ever considered yourself as a perfectionist? And I said, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm an Australian champion athlete, 3-time state champion. I've competed at the extreme games. I'm the furthest thing from a perfectionist. And he said, interesting. And he showed me my personality type, and everything in there about the perfectionist was me. And what I learned, and I never knew this for 40 years, Heather, was that perfectionists grow up in an environment where they get punished for making mistakes. So when I was at home, I'd get punished for making a mistake. When I went to school, I got punished for making a mistake. Yeah. But then when I left school and left home, there was nobody there to punish me. So who has to do the punishment? I went into self-punishment. And a lot of us do it. It's the way that we talk to ourselves. It's the long hours that we force ourselves to work. It's a form of punishment. And what I used to do, I used to grind till 4 a.m. in the morning, but it was a way of punishing myself for making mistakes. Now, for 40 years, nobody could have ever explained that to me. Nobody could ever have pointed it out to me. And nobody ever drew the connection between what I was doing at age 40 and the root cause, which was all the way back in my younger years. See, when I was learning to play the guitar as part of remedial therapy, I would make mistakes because I was tone deaf. Nobody knew I was tone deaf, but they punished me for making mistakes. So what I learned was learning was painful. And when you make a mistake, somebody's going to punish you. And when nobody's there to punish you, you go into self-harm. And I had a whole life history, 30 years of self-harm. Up to age 40, I was still self-harming. But I had never even consciously been aware of the harm that I was doing to myself. And that was my breakthrough moment. I said, I've got it. I understand this. I don't have to do it anymore. And it stopped. And that was my biggest breakthrough with this technology. And that's why Nina and I are so excited about it, because it's given us breakthroughs that we weren't able to have on our own. And so for the past 4 years, my personal success has increased. My business success has increased. But my self-acceptance, I finally accept who I am. And I don't have to prove myself to anybody anymore.
Yeah.
And this is the breakthrough that I've had.
That's huge, because everyone I talk to, people that are high achievers that are driving forward in this world to do extraordinary things, it often is you're never enough. And that's a common thread. And that sort of just self-talk and putting yourself down really resonates with me, because not only have I done it and do it, but so many people that I talk to that are in this space of making change and being leaders do it all the time.
Heather, the first sign of it, all we have to do is have a look at our goals. And every perfectionist sets unrealistic goals and standards. Yeah. And the problem is the world feeds it and the world encourages it. So when I started my coaching business, 2009, I was only earning $50,000 a year in my full-time career. Working full-time, $50,000. And I had a goal to make $1 million a year in my coaching side hustle. And people were saying, Daniel, there's people out there earning $1 million a year. They're doing $100,000 months. And people fueled it. But what it was an unrealistic standard. And when you think about it, if you can only earn $50,000 a month in your full-time career, how is it possible to earn $1 million a year investing 2 hours a week in your business? So we always start with these unrealistic standards. Now, even if we started to earn more money, let's say we earned our first $100,000. Statistically, most coaches around the world don't even earn $45,000 a year. But if you did $100,000 in your first year in your coaching business, you couldn't be happy. You couldn't be satisfied. You'd look down on yourself and you'd say, but the goal was $1 million. You're 900,000 short. Even when I ended my career and I got to 500,000 a year, I still said I'm 500,000 short of my goal. I didn't stop to celebrate that I was doing 10 times more money than all the other coaches. I couldn't accept that. People would say, Daniel, you're doing so well. I couldn't accept the compliment. But I've got to punish myself. I've got to work longer and harder.
You're so spot on. It's ridiculous with how you've described that. I mean, obviously I very much relate to that, but so many people, you just totally hit the nail on the head. Thank you for sharing that. Oh gosh. Okay. I want to know, how do people work with you? What's the best place for them to go to? Obviously to take this assessment, the voice assessment would be amazing, but how else do they find out about you?
Well, the best way is go to my website, danieltolson.com. And on the top right-hand side, you'll see a button that says Mind Report Free. Free means no cost. Free means $0. And all I want you to do is go there, click the button, and I want you to register for your opportunity to experience Mind Report for yourself. Now, I've delivered more than 10,000 emotional quotient assessments, and I'm going to help you understand who you are, why you think and feel the way that you do. Immediately, you'll have an improvement in your self-awareness. You'll understand the right path to go on, and you'll also feel a lot more confident and hope for a better future. So go to my website, danieltolson.com, click the button Mind Report Free. Free means nothing. I'll cover the cost. I just want you to experience this technology because it's given me breakthroughs that I couldn't have on my own.
You guys have to do it. Seriously. And he mentioned about the chakras as well. That was in my report too. So I almost feel like we should do a separate call and you can analyze my report with me publicly, but I'm not really sure if I'm ready for that.
I've got yours here. I've got yours here in front of me. And you and I have something in common.
And what's that?
It's our solar plexus chakra. For me, for 20 years, I would always beat myself up that I'm not disciplined enough. And I'd say to my wife, I'm going to get a tattoo, discipline. I'm going to have it tattooed on my chest for a reminder every day that I need more discipline.
Right.
And unfortunately, what happens is when our solar plexus chakra is underactive, yours is underactive, mine's underactive, we actually don't have a problem with discipline. It's a problem with willpower. So in my life, what happens is if the kids bring home chocolate biscuits and they're on the bench, I do not have the willpower to not eat them. My level of willpower is low. I have to eat that thing. Like that devil on the shoulder saying, Daniel, don't eat that biscuit. Daniel, don't go into the kitchen. Daniel, you'll have one and you'll eat the whole bag. And that devil is the low willpower. So what I have to be aware of and what you have to be aware of is there's nothing wrong with this. It's just part of our inner programming that when the gods programmed us, they didn't give us enough willpower. And so it's not discipline that's the problem. It's the willingness. It's the willpower. And when I look at your report and mine, we're very similar in that area.
Okay, thank you for explaining it like that, because I was going around at the conference in Cebu and I'm like, we're all comparing our notes, right? Because everyone in the audience, you guys did this, so a few hundred people, and we all did the test. And I'm going around, I'm like, oh my gosh, I must be strange because no one else has this strange lack of solar plexus. Yeah. Okay. Yes, because when you said the word discipline, I'm like, I feel like I'm pretty disciplined, but thank you. That explained it.
And this is the same thing I see with people with the less active energy is we think it's discipline. It's not discipline. It's the willpower. And it's something that we've got to learn to work with over time. The other thing which is really interesting is your crown chakra all the way up here has a lot of energy.
Ooh, I remember that from the report. I had no idea what that really meant.
Your third eye chakra, just in here, has too much energy. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because when I look at this and interpret this, is the first thing, without knowing you personally, and I've never asked you this, I would just have to assume that you have you have a lot of, you could almost be seen as psychic. When you meet people, you could talk to them, you could tell them about things that they didn't even know about themselves. When you look at somebody, you go, I can just listen to their voice and I know the problems they're having. Do you feel a little bit psychic at times?
Definitely. People have told me that. How do you know that about me? Yeah.
And that's what happens is when you've got a lot of energy in that crown chakra, one of the problems is sometimes we can live dissociated from our bodies, but it also gives us this heightened sensory perception. So we're not just listening to the words that people are saying, we're listening to how they say it. And you'll listen to their words, and I know you're very well trained from people like Christopher Howard and Tony Robbins. You read between the lines, and when you talk to people, because your throat chakra is very active, you're the voice of clarity. And people say to you, Heather, I've heard this 1,000 times, but I've never understood it until you've said it.
How did you know that? Oh my gosh.
And when you're on stage in Cebu, I was texting you, I'm going, you're the best speaker here, other than my wife. I've got to say my wife's the best.
We have to.
But you were the best speaker.
Because you're second. She and you are top. So go.
All competitive. And you were up there and you were saying things that I've heard 1,000 times. I'm going, I finally get it. And you've only been doing a 17-minute keynote.
Yeah.
And that's why I was texting you going, you're the best speaker at the event. And that's that voice of clarity you have. So a lot of those energy centers are really working in your favor.
Do you guys see how cool this is? My God, like just right now, you reframing some of the things that, first of all, I didn't interpret the report 100% because we had a short amount of time. But secondly, the self-talk in me goes, oh, this is, I could be better in this area. But you've just highlighted superpower moments for myself. And now I'm like, oh, this is cool. This makes sense. And I've suddenly, in my brain, gone off a gazillion different directions on how I can use my strengths just from our little tiny conversation right now. So
the same thing happened to me in 2016 when I took my first report. I'm an Australian champion athlete, the best in my field, 3-time state champion, the best in the state. I've competed at extreme games with the world's best. It's like the Olympics. And people used to tell me, Daniel, you're too competitive. And I'm confused because I've got an angel on one shoulder that says, Daniel, you have a superpower of competition. You want to win. You want to be the best. You want to be the top dog. And this angel's saying, go for it, go for it, go for it. But because of heterogenic conditioning and other people telling me being competitive is a bad thing, I started to think that this superpower of being competitive was a negative. I thought it was a limiter on my potential. So I started to repress that for years and years. And it wasn't until this workplace psychologist took me through a scientific report and said, Daniel, your superpower is competition. You've got to go out there and compete. Within 100 days, my income increased $100,000. That $100,000 turned into an extra $240,000 by the end of the year and 1,300 customers within that year. And then I was recognized as Brian Tracy's Rookie Business Coach of the Year globally. And here I am using that competitive strength again. And that's what we want for people. You start to go, oh, wow, I've got that superpower and I haven't been using it. All of a sudden you start to use it and you get the results that you haven't had before. And it's just a blind spot. And then there's a lot of good blind spots, by the way.
Okay, well, I was going to say let's wrap up, but just hold on a second. Good blind spots? What do you mean?
Well, we always hear blind spots and we hear it to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
But
definitely.
sometimes there's a lot of things in our blind spots that are waiting to come up to the conscious level. So, for example, one of my clients, he's very influential. He's very persuasive, but he's also discontented. Now, people hear discontent. Oh my gosh, that's a bad thing. No, discontent is a good thing. You've just got to learn how to get that working for you. So here's my client. He's really influential, but he doesn't want to show his team that he's pissed off about the low performance of the business.
Yeah.
And I said to him, tell people that you're not satisfied. Tell people that when your business does $100,000 a month, that it's not good enough. Tell them that this business has the capacity to do $500,000 months. And so that blind spot, he brought it back into his awareness. And he started to lead his team differently. His team reduced from doing 5-day weeks down to 4 days. His business went from $50,000 months to $800,000 months. And he says, I'm not happy we can go further. And they say, boss, let's go. And that's a good blind spot to have.
Isn't it? Wow. Okay, beautiful. So as we finally start to wrap up, because I'm could seriously sit here for another 2 hours and keep talking through this stuff. We've already established how people can do this test, so you guys have to go over there. There's obviously links in the show notes as well. Go check out what Daniel is up to. And as we do wrap up, is there one good, solid piece of advice or words of wisdom that you'd like to leave our listeners with in their moments where they're like, God, I'm struggling right now. What do I do?
3 words. Start with sleep. You know, they say that fatigue makes cowards of us all. And there's nobody who can perform at their best when they're sleep deprived. It has been shown that if you take a 36-hour sabbatical, 6 p.m. on Saturday night, turn your phone off, turn your devices off, do nothing with business, and don't turn your devices back on until 6 a.m. Monday morning, that on Monday morning you're going to be 400% more productive. Your brain is like a battery and it needs rest. You need rest. And it's not until you actually stop and take a step back that all of your creativity comes up. And it's happened to everybody on the podcast. You've had a busy day, you're feeling numb, you want the world to slow down, you want everything to stop. You hop in the shower, you're only thinking about one thing, washing yourself, and all of those $1 million ideas start to flow through.
True.
Why? Because you're resting, you're relaxing. You know, millionaires, they have on average 6 to 7 hours of sleep per night. Billionaires on average sleep 7 to 8 hours per night. And everybody who's struggling to make ends meet is sleep deprived and sleeping less than 5 hours a night. So look at the numbers. Sleep's free. Billionaires don't have to pay for it. They just know it's a priority. So start with sleep.
Absolutely brilliant way to end up. And guys, no, I don't think Daniel is a voice on one of those Calm apps because you have such a beautiful, fantastic meditative voice that actually, do you do meditation at all? Like, can people listen to your voice to do meditation?
Meditation's the old way.
What's the new way?
You know what we do now? The new way is sound frequency therapy.
Of course. Yes.
And
yes.
with sound frequency therapy, all we need to do is listen to a customized sound frequency for our chakras in our mind and body. And just using your ears, you can make a change. So thank you for the compliment. I hired Oprah Winfrey's voice coach, a very good friend of mine, Bob Korf. He's trained more than 1,000 Hollywood celebrities, including Channing Tatum, Samuel L. Jackson, the cast of Pirates of the Caribbean. And I hired him 6 years ago because as a leader, the number one most important skill that you've got to develop is the ability to speak. Yeah. And the problem with a lot of people's voices, especially if you're Australian, it's very whiny. Hey, mate, how you going?
And it goes up to the
Can you
end.
give me a hand over here? And you hear this high-pitched voice and no one takes it serious. And Brian Tracy told me, he said, Daniel, you've got a great message, but the problem is your tone of voice. He said the Australian accent confuses a lot of people. He said you've got to go and learn the standard American melody. And so I've spent 8 years correcting my voice. And it's probably been one of the things that I've got the highest ROI on that I've ever done.
It's incredible. You have such a unique sound and voice and very easy to listen to. So Thank you. Thank you for being here, sharing so much amazingness with our listeners and even myself. I've learned a lot about myself during this chat. So much, greatly appreciated.
Thank you.